Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our coverage of the summit. I'm your Taran Armstrong, and I'm here with, of course, Chappell here at RHAP to cover the summit episode 9. How you doing, Chappell?
Taran, I'm good. I'm always happy to talk to you about this show, but I've been waiting for something exciting to happen, something I didn't expect to happen, and I think I got it. I think I got the moment that was going to make the season for me. I was not expecting things to go the way they did, yeah, I think we got something to talk about this time.
Yes, Becky Lee has fallen.
The queen. Oh, man.
I feel this. I mean, this has to be the best sort of strategy portion of the show so far, right? Like, it still doesn't beat Bo,
No.
but like in terms of strategic content, we finally got something.
Yeah, like the second episode of the season and the penultimate episode of the season are like bangers. I think if you had this same energy throughout, I think that's the sweet spot. And I think we've kind of talked about it. We wanted more of the both stuff. And we've been saying the strategy is kind of like you kind of understand who people like and don't like, but then randomly somebody's name will come up and the balls just get rolling on them. But this was very clear. We had 5 people left, and we knew where most people stood with in regards to their alliances and stuff. So it was just a matter of seeing how it played out. So we finally got it. So if the producers are listening to this show, listen to us talk about the show, then this is what we want. Somewhere in the middle of that. When the people fall, they die, or we cut them and we lose them forever. Like something like that, and we make it as dramatic as possible. And then we allow them to do some sexy blindsides, something like this that really have you say like, man, I didn't think they were going to get Becky Lee, but she ran out of time, Therron. And we talked about it. We definitely knew it was a possibility. I just didn't think it would come caving in so quickly like it did.
Yeah, I mean, they even start this episode with the same stuff we've been getting all season, which is like, oh, I'm going after this person, and nobody's mentioning Becky Lee's name at all until right at the end. Now, okay, basically, I think what the story we're told is that like Nick tricks Pumpkin into turning on Becky Lee, right? And that's sort of like the emotional thrust of the episode, which makes sense because that's what like Becky Lee was focusing on. And it was a huge part of the fallout, which was the most entertaining part of the episode. But it feels to me like the reality here was that it was just always going to be up to Therron. And Therron just decided he wanted to keep Nick over Becky Lee.
Yeah, we saw this exactly the same way. It does look like, because Pumpkin's telling us throughout, I want Nick out. I want Nick out. I want Nick out. But you can't vote Nick out with 2 people. You need a third. Jeannie's telling us for like at least 5-6 episodes by now that she's not going after Nick at any point. So we know he has Jeannie locked up. We know Becky Lee thinks that she has Therron. But when it's time to vote, nobody's hand goes up, including Therron's. I think if Therron raises his hand to get rid of Nick, I think Pumpkin's hand goes up. But there's no point in Pumpkin being like, it's me, I want Nick out. Yeah, we all know you do. But voting for him to get him out and Therron's not coming with you is not going to make any difference. And even we see Becky Lee go to Therron and say, all right, Therron, it's our moment. We're getting Nick. And Therron's like, what? Why? And I'm thinking, well, Therron, if not Nick, then who is it that you want to vote out? It's either Jeannie or Pumpkin or Becky Lee. And if I'm Becky Lee, I'm like, oh God, I lost it at this point. The moment Therron seemed surprised to want Nick out, I would think, oh yeah, I'm running out of time. I definitely think that Becky Lee played a strong game up to this point, but there are some flaws. There are definitely some flaws, and I think a lot of them were highlighted in this episode.
Yeah, I think one of the primary ones, she's like begging Jeannie for a vote at the end there, and just clearly didn't foster that relationship, which is not a huge deal. Like, it's not a huge deal. Like, oh, if Nick gets Jeannie, but then you can't keep Nick until the final 5 when he has a Jeannie in his back pocket, which I would say the same thing to Therron. I don't know how the end game works, but like, it was an interesting choice if you're going to keep Nick and Jeannie in the final 4 with you. But that's clearly like a huge miss there. And then man, like the quickness with which Pumpkin was, like, whether or not it mattered, was able to turn on her clearly means that like something went wrong there, right? I mean, basically, like Becky Lee gets in trouble because she sticks her neck out for Pumpkin. She's like, I don't want Pumpkin to go. I want Nick to go instead. And that's kind of what turns the target from Pumpkin to her. And Pumpkin's like, man, you betrayed me, Becky Lee.
Okay, well, we talk about this on other shows, but it happens all the time, right? Like in Big Brother, you can betray your number one ally, and it doesn't matter as long as they don't win HOH. If you win HOH, hey, no harm, no foul. It's over, right? Like, what are you gonna do about it? And so when Becky Lee goes to make this big swing at Nick, she has to make the swings. Like she has to hit the mark, and she doesn't get to the bag before him. So now she's stuck out. And so she's looking at these people that she's been leading on this entire game to have her back. And she can say she's had Pumpkin back, but she has betrayed Pumpkin several times. Pumpkin wanted Dennis out a long time ago. She blindsided her with Dusty. I think she blindsided her before with Jeff. She blindsided her with one other person, I think. I think there's been 3 blindsides where we're like, when is Pumpkin going to say something about Therron and Becky Lee just running amok? And so it's not like, Pumpkin owed Becky Lee anything just because, Becky Lee has picked her to be her GOAT or her mark or even her final 2 pair.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the thing that's missing in that relationship, right? Is that like from Becky Lee's perspective, she's like, yeah, I'm taking Pumpkin to the end. Like she's, and I probably feels genuinely like this is a good relationship that I'm choosing to maybe even do a slightly suboptimal route in order to bring Pumpkin over Nick because I have that power. But throughout the game has not treated Pumpkin like a partner. It's treated Pumpkin like a pawn. And when you do that, you do leave yourself, I think, more vulnerable to outside influences getting in, messing you up. And like maybe if Becky Lee had been more with Pumpkin, or really just like not choosing somebody that you had to blindside so many times as your endgame person, might have made a difference there. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think that the Pumpkin thing really matters. I think the thing we should be focusing on is what happened with the relationship with Therron, because just last episode we were saying they were the two. It was Therron and Becky Lee that were making the call. It was the two of them that seemed locked in, and then all of a sudden Therron was like, nah, I like Pumpkin more. I also like Nick more. And then you know what? I'll take Jeannie over Becky Lee. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, I would have loved for Becky Lee to go to Therron and say, who do you want to vote out this round? Because she goes and says Nick, and Therron's like, what? Like he legit looked like, well, Nick, that doesn't make any sense for me. I'm thinking, okay, well, Therron, what does make sense for you? And you're right. I think somewhere, and it might be, what we talked about a little bit is like they got removed from the game a little bit, and now they come back, and Therron's talking about Pumpkin in a light that he's never talked about before. He goes, it'd be really cool to see 2 queer Black people at the end of the game. It's like, that's crazy. You've never mentioned that before. Like
it's possible he had, and it just got brought up now, but like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I've never heard him say that. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And, so maybe it is like a greater good type situation, but it's still, Jeannie is definitely still an option. I think Therron looked at the numbers and like, Becky Lee, and Nick was saying something like this too. Becky Lee has betrayed a bunch of people. Becky Lee was saying the same thing about Nick. If these 2 people have been savvy enough to cut all our other big threats, why wouldn't they cut one of us? And so if Therron's looking around and saying like, Becky Lee has cut Dennis and cut Dusty and Jeff and all these other people who felt good about her, I cut them too. But what if she decides to cut me? Then what? What if her and Pumpkin decide to cut me out? At least this way I know that I'm probably number 2.5 with Nick and Jeannie, to some extent. Whereas with Pumpkin and Becky Lee, it looks like I'm going to be 3rd regardless. And I think that maybe that's what helps sway him a little bit. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe. I just like, I'm trying to think, but it's so hard to tell because I think it just feels like we might have to be missing some things in terms of where allegiances stand. But like from the perspective they've given us, it seems as though you're never like Jeannie is the kind of player who is just locked in on Nick, never going to turn on him, which means Nick is always going to have one extra vote, which like if I'm Therron and I want control at the final 4 to not be at worst in a deadlock tie, especially knowing that Nick was just able to turn Pumpkin on Becky Lee so easily. Like I'm very scared about going to a final 4 with Nick and Jeannie and Pumpkin, who's so easily influenced. And all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, I think I'd rather take out somebody like Jeannie, or Nick, and go to the end with Pumpkin, Becky Lee, and Jeannie. And now, granted, up until this point, you'd think the opposite. You'd think Nick doesn't have as much influence. Becky Lee has too much influence. But I think the fact that Becky Lee was so easily disarmed in this episode, and the fact that Jeannie is so locked in on Nick, I think that helps you make the decision. But it also seemed like the decision was a little rushed. So that may have contributed as well.
Yeah, I mean, the scramble right before they vote is just Becky Lee walking. I mean, they're all doing it right in front of each other. It's very like a double elimination style, a double eviction style, where it's like, okay, can I just pull you over to this corner and whisper to you real quick? It's like, excuse me, Jeannie, I need to talk to Nick. Nick, we're voting out a Pumpkin. And it's like, oh, okay, sure. And then like you immediately walk over from Nick and go straight to Pumpkin, like, we're voting out Nick. It's like, I see you. We can see this is happening. So it's very rushed. And you put Pumpkin in a position where she's like, well, look, Nick wants me out now, but like, I've always wanted Nick out. I've been telling you this for a while, and now all of a sudden we got to get Nick out. Like same thing I was saying about Dusty, same thing about Dennis or whatever. And you didn't move on it, and now all of a sudden we have to move on it now for you. And it's crazy because it was going to be Pumpkin's name versus Nick's name, and somehow in the middle of it, it switches to like, no, I think it's going to be Nick or Becky Lee. And I didn't see that coming. I really thought that at the end of the day, the two nominees were going to be those two. And then, Becky Lee, Therron, and Jeannie were probably going to have to decide. And maybe because of that, we would have saw maybe Pumpkin get voted out because Therron and Jeannie were going to stay loyal. It was the switch where Becky Lee's name gets up getting nominated. That's where, I think that Nick does a really good job. If she hadn't gone for that bag, I don't know if her name comes up in that moment.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, let's just look at the events that happened based on what we saw. It does actually feel like there was, basically what happens is it's going to be Pumpkin or Nick, and Becky Lee would prefer it to be Nick. And so in order for it to be Nick, she needs one more vote because Jeannie's going to vote Pumpkin, Nick's going to vote Pumpkin. And Therron becomes the swing there. And so Becky Lee goes to Therron and says, can we vote out Nick over Pumpkin? And Therron essentially is like, no, I don't want to vote out Nick. He goes to Nick and rats out Becky Lee and says, I'm going to create a third option, which is Becky Lee. I think that he originally wanted Jeannie, which I do think makes a lot more sense for his game. But like if he's pitching Jeannie to Becky Lee, who's saying no, it has to be Nick, and Pumpkin wants Nick, and Nick wants Pumpkin, and Jeannie wants Pumpkin, then how can he get the votes for Jeannie might be the question. But I think at that point, you can just flip it back around. You can go to Becky Lee and say, listen, the vote with Nick is not happening, but we can get Jeannie. But again, there might not have been enough time, and so on and so forth. But like, it feels like it really did just kind of like come down to these quick decisions that just happened.
Yeah, what happens if Becky Lee nominates Jeannie? When Manu says, is there any nominees? And she says Jeannie. And does Nick still say, okay, Becky Lee? Or are we waiting on Pumpkin to step in and be like, or Nick?
If Therron still wants Jeannie, right? If Therron still wants Jeannie and Becky Lee raises her hand on Jeannie, Therron might raise his hand on Jeannie and look at Pumpkin and be like, "Hey, let's do Jeannie," and that works, right? But that's so risky for Therron and for Becky Lee. So
is it risky for Becky Lee though? I mean, because look at the alternative. It's like Nick's like, if you nominate me, I'm going to nominate you. So it's like, okay, maybe I'll nominate Jeannie and see what happens. I mean, Jeannie could definitely nominate her. But I think the vote being, Jeannie versus Becky Lee, maybe Therron gets to have his cake and eat it too. He can say, all right, I'll get rid of Jeannie here. That keeps Nick in my pocket. We know that him and Becky Lee are not getting along right now. Pumpkin don't even trust either of them, so maybe this is the perfect moment. I think that when Becky Lee started getting, it got kind of personal, I think, between her and Nick at that point. It was like one of us has to go. It's like, yeah, but she was perfectly fine with Pumpkin nominating Nick at first. Even Nick, and I'll give him a lot of credit, when he goes to Becky Lee, he's like, so you want Pumpkin out too, right? She's like, yeah, of course. He's like, so you would nominate her? yeah, I don't have an issue nominating her with you. And he's like, yeah, I definitely don't want to nominate her. I don't want to do it. I'll vote her out, but I'm not going to nominate her. And Becky's like, oh yeah, I'll do it. So when he goes to Pumpkin and says she's throwing your name out there, he's not even completely lying. She did tell him that she would vote, she would nominate Pumpkin. So it's kind of like if Becky Lee was like, nah, I don't really want to nominate Pumpkin either. Jeannie, like what could she have done differently? Because I think there's some wiggle room there. I don't think it had to be Nick versus Becky Lee if she didn't want it to be.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it was such a just chaotic series of events. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, at the end of the day, like the thing that gets it rolling is that she just isn't willing to give up Pumpkin. Because if she just goes with what Therron wants and does either Jeannie or Pumpkin, instead of Nick, then I think she easily makes it to Final Four. And then, who knows what happens from there.
Yeah.
But
the train,
yeah.
to me, the train had left the station when she went for the bag. So the Mountains Keeper drops the bag,
Yeah.
and then they have a full-on sprint. And they did it the last time the Mountains Keeper dropped the bag, but this time felt even more dire. I mean, she like dives head first, and it's like a game of inches between her and Nick, because they think that maybe this could be another moment where you can just eliminate somebody on the spot like they did last time. Or, RIP Dusty.
What's funny is if it had been, I think Pumpkin goes there.
Pumpkin goes, right? Like, I don't think Nick in that moment is like, Becky, what was that? But I think given that it wasn't that, and there was time and he probably saw how guilty Becky Lee looked on her face. I think he's like, what's going on here? What were you actually going to do? Why did you care so much to beat me to the bag? And so from there, I think she identifies Nick as somebody who cannot trust her anymore. It's like she completely like took off her mask for a second, and now it's like, I don't think she can, in good faith, go through this round not wanting to get Nick out, because if you give him another opportunity, if there's another bag situation, Becky Lee, it's you. Yeah, I think Pumpkin has dodged that bullet, and I think it's now you. Or if she's gone, it's definitely you.
Basically what you're saying is that, like, because to me it felt like they showed Nick being like a little suspicious, but they were still very much set on Pumpkin up until Therron tells them that Becky Lee's trying to get him out. But from Becky Lee's perspective, she's like, I got caught. Now I'm stuck. Now I need to do this. Yeah.
I've heard you talk about this before with Big Brother, right? Where it's like, you betrayed this person. I think Quinn and Rubina, right? He betrays Rubina, and then the whole game he's like, Rubina doesn't trust me. And Rubina's like, I'm good. It's like, I got to get her out. It's like, I'm fine. Everything is fine. I'm over it. It's been 2 days, but the people who are savvier players, I think a lot of times they know that, like, what would I do in this situation, right? Like, what would be the optimal strategy? If somebody betrayed me like this, would I ever trust them again? No. And so I think for her, she's like, I've gone too far down this rabbit hole. Now I have to end it. I have to complete the task here. And that put her in a position where it was either her or Nick. And it just didn't work out. Man, it's very sad though, because it's like we watch these games and you hope that the player that's playing like kind of like the savviest game or the most aggressive game, like you kind of want them to do well, because I think it incentivizes people who play in future seasons to do that, and it's more exciting to watch. But at the same time, it's like it does add a level of unpredictability that it's like, okay, maybe, just maybe, there are some twists and turns, and this game isn't so like, it wasn't the Becky Lee march to the end that we thought it was going to be. And I'm not quite sure which I like more, because I feel bad. She made it to day 13 out of 14 to just get cut. It happens, but I don't know. I wanted more from my queen, man. This is tough.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly made for a more exciting episode, which was nice. And like, I don't know, like, sorry, Becky Lee, but like, watching her flail was more entertaining than probably
really
watching her win would have been.
It really was. Jeannie, please. I was like, I've never seen you say one word to Jeannie throughout this entire show. Could you think of the relationship she's had with Jeannie thus far? I don't think it exists. And so for her to be like, Jeannie, babes, listen, Nick won't take you. She's like, why would I think you would take me? What are you talking about? So, it was bad. It was a slow motion, just train crash. And we got to have front row seats for it.
Well, okay. Chappell, I did some research today because number one, I watched the preview for next time. Did you watch the preview?
I think so. Yes. Okay, so yes, we got the helicopter and we find out we might be seeing our people, our fallen comrades come back.
Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna talk about the preview for next time. If you for some reason don't want to hear it, but listen, they give you a hint of how the end game's gonna work, but we still don't even know for sure. Basically, it sounds like it's gonna be some kind of jury. But I feel like they said two things. They said one is they're gonna determine how much money you win, whoever makes the top. But then they also said they're gonna determine who wins.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are two different statements.
Those feel
right?
like two very different things.
yeah. Like
now
it
could be like they determine who wins in terms of like, okay, let's say all four of them make it to the summit. The jury could be like, we're gonna pick and choose Therron and Genie. Those two win, and because only two of them win instead of all four, you're gonna get more money each. Right? Or we could say all four of you win, or, and this is like the real key, none of you win.
Yeah, which is very interesting considering Becky's final words were, if it was up to me, none of you would win.
Right? Because so this is the thing. I did a little research. I went on to there's a small little subreddit for the summit. There's some discussion happening around. It seems to me like there's a good portion of the fan base that is actively rooting for everyone to fail and for nobody to win.
Well, I understand that because a lot of people were very turned off by the Jeff vote and the Dusty vote, considering we didn't know why they were eliminating them. It was like, Jeff is good. Like, we were only told these people needed to make it to the summit in a certain amount of time. That's all we were told. Those were the only rules of the game. And it's like, yeah, we had to vote out people, but the end of the day, we just knew that an undisclosed amount of people needed to make it to the top. So when it's the third or fourth elimination, and you're like, you know who's really good at helping us make these checkpoints on time? Jeff. Let's vote him out. You're like, what? He hasn't done anything to make us feel like there are people slowing you down. He seems like he's on the up and up. He doesn't seem like a jerk or anything like that. What's going on? And then to see it happen again with Dusty, and there's still no explanation for why you're cutting these people who are seemingly good for the actual task at hand, right? For making the checkpoints on time. Then you say, well, no, I hope y'all lose because y'all clearly don't care about meeting the checkpoints on time as much as you should. Now, I would say that with the group that they have right now, this is a solid group. We will see a couple people falter a little bit in this challenge that they had today, but I don't think this is a solid group, but I do think that when you have people like Amy that you're complaining about for 3 or 4 episodes, like they're so slow, and then you keep them along, people want to say, all right, well, since you kept them, I hope none of you win. I hope you are punished for not basically disobeying what we believe are the rules of the game, which is make it as fast as you can. So I'm not shocked by that at all.
So one of my favorite movies is Cube. Small little sci-fi movie. I really like the idea of a show where they go through this arduous journey and they're at each other's throats. They vote each other off. In a small group of them make it to the summit. But then the people that they, sort of discarded along the way then come up and say, you know what? Nobody gets anything.
Yeah, congratulations. You get a moral victory. You made it to the top.
We all fail because that is the nature of humans, is that we want to drag everyone down with us. And that would genuinely it would redeem the show for me because it would be so unique.
Yeah, we would have never it's been a long time since we've had a finale twist that would be something like that on any of these competition shows, right? And so I agree. I think that this journey, it makes so much more sense if at the end they're like, and there is no winner because you all didn't follow because you betrayed us, because you could have just followed the rules. Now, don't get me wrong, that could make next season very boring because maybe next season people are like, okay, we're gonna time these people. Whoever's the slowest person, you gotta go because I don't want anybody having any ill feelings toward us at the end. But you can change it up next season because Taran, I too did some research. I was sent the Parade magazine, the Parade.com article written by our very own Mike Bloom here on RHAP. And apparently, according to Mike Bloom, in the Australian seasons of this show, like you were saying, the first season, the eliminated players were brought in and they had to determine the split of the $500,000 prize. So I don't know if they were like, this person gets 100,000, you get, or if it was divided by
a
three,
group of people determine a split. That's such a weird.
Right. And so I was like, Mike, are they saying that they just came in and divided it equally? They were like, okay, the three of you will split it, or is it like, no, you can get the most and you can get the second most and you deserve it the least? And then the second season, which had a handful of celebrities, it gave the power. It gave one of the finalists, the powers to split the pot. And so the finalist was the one who was like, okay, I'll determine how much each of us get or how many people get.
Oh, I like that better. I like that better.
Exactly.
Actually.
So that means they're not beholden to one set of rules if we're doing that, right? Like it's changed each time. And I think that makes this even more entertaining because maybe this time they can say there's no winner. But next season, Manu starts it off with, and this time somebody is taking home the money. You're like, okay.
Or what they could do is be like, listen, last time the fallen contestants prevented anybody from winning. This time they will not have the ability to do that, but we are not going to guarantee that you get the money. I like the idea of like, we might not, because all season long they've been like, what if we don't make it to the summit? Then nobody gets the money. But it's never been believable once that they're not going to get there. And so if they actually do fail, I think that sets up a second season really well, where it's like, wait, is somebody actually going to win this time? Like that's kind of like what American Ninja Warrior does, where it's like, if somebody actually wins, it's like a big deal. Because it's hard to win. So I don't know. And at the same time, like, for as much as we love torturing reality contestants, like, I want them compensated for their troubles.
They deserve something. They deserve something because this is crazy. Like we are aware that they were lied to about how they ended up on this show. These people did not apply to climb no mountain. You cannot tell me that they did. Just based on every episode, someone going, "I'm so afraid of heights. I can just quit right now. Like I can't believe." Then you did not sign up to climb a mountain. You did not know this was a thing until you got here. So give them a little bit of money. But Taran, let's say they don't give them anything this time, right? Like you lose, everybody loses. We failed the summit, the mission. The mountains keeper has spoken. Blah blah blah. Roll the pot over to next.
Yes.
Yes. Roll
now,
the
given
pot
how
over.
stingy they are with removing money, they're probably never going to do this. But yes.
Especially because they're going to eliminate so many people and take their money anyway, right? So it's like you might actually get to an opportunity where maybe you could win $1 million on this show. Because right now you're gonna win about $500K, maybe, But if you roll the pot over enough times, by season 3 or 4, you're like, man, it's like a lottery. It's actually up to about $1 million, so 1.5 million.
The optimal strategy at this point is be a Becky Lee, be one of the biggest characters on the show.
Back for All Stars.
Fail, prevent anybody from winning any money. Come back later, get the double pot.
Get the money. I'm just saying, like once you got to the summit, hey, we're snatching all that money from you per the eliminated contestants, but there's a season 2. You can apply. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's fans versus favorites. Maybe we bring back some of you. Maybe the people who made it to the top, we bring you back for next season, but you're with a whole new cast of people, right? Like, so the 4 of you that made it to the top, boom, here's another 12. And you have all the skills now. You have the leg up. You know the strategy of the game. You've been here before. You've done this. But these people have seen you play. And maybe they're greedy and they don't want you to have it. Maybe that spices it up. Look, we're playing the long game here on the summit.
I like the idea also. So there's another way I was thinking of when you mentioned how they did the second season in Australia. What if the jury, so to speak, votes for one person to be the person who decides the split of how much money they give? So it's basically like, hey, we're voting for you, Therron, to then decide, do you want to split the money or keep all of it?
Yes.
And they don't get to decide, which then would make me feel like if I'm Becky Lee, I'm voting for Nick.
Right.
You wanted to keep him over me? Let's see how trustworthy he is.
And Nick is keeping every dime, okay? Nick is keeping every dime. You know what? I would love to see Pumpkin in that spot. Like, Pumpkin,
Pumpkin would share the money.
Yeah, she would, but treat yourself, Queen. I'd be like, Pumpkin, these people, all these people, nothing. Everybody, if Pumpkin makes it to the top, everybody she's with has lied to her multiple times throughout the game. Like, these are not her allies. She's up there with the wolves, okay? So I feel like at that point, all bets are off. Go take care of your new family.
Pumpkin taking all the money for herself would be also a great ending to the season.
Oh yeah, top tier season. You can't tell me different. Okay, if she like has now woken up and she's like,
or Jeannie.
Oh my God, Jeannie doesn't. If Jeannie has that in her, I promise. My favorite reality TV contestant of all time. Bring her for the traitors, okay? I want her on every show. It was great seeing Jeannie's family in this episode, like, you know, when they got their little family visit videos and stuff. And so, yeah, I really appreciate her as somebody who you would have kind of written off as they was like, she's one of the moms, she's on the slower side, and her social game was good enough to get her in with Therron and Nick and even Dennis, you know, and so she has done a really good job of making sure that she was in the number. She hasn't been like a real big standout when it comes to the strategy portion, but it doesn't sound like that matters too much. As a matter of fact, getting to the top and being like, I just was not the slowest person and I didn't orchestrate a lot of y'all's evictions or your eliminations. Maybe they're like, yeah, you know what? Honestly, we're okay with Jeannie winning this game. Nick, you betrayed us. Pumpkin, you didn't betray us, but Jeannie and Pumpkin, y'all split the money. Therron and Nick, go to hell. I can see that happening for sure. That's the energy I would have. I'd be like, the two of you can rock, but y'all two can have the money, and then we can all go out for drinks after this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to see, I guess, like, should we make a prediction? If there's some sort of vote for one of the final contestants, who do we think is going to receive the vote, regardless of what it does, either giving them all of the money or allowing them to choose or just giving them most of the money or whatever? Who do we think has the most support at this point?
I think Therron's the most popular contestant, but my only caveat here is that, you know, we saw in the preview for the next episode, people like Amy are like, you lied to everybody. And I'm like, I don't know if Nick lied to everybody, but Therron definitely lied to everybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Dusty, pretty salty at Therron. Dusty also probably has a lot of influence. He was very well liked by a lot of the eliminated contestants. Him and Amy both might feel a way about Therron. But Patty and Amy also were a little skeptical of Nick at various points throughout the season. There's plenty of reason to be a little salty at Nick. And I don't know how far back they're going either. I saw Rob. I don't know if I saw Jeff. Like, I don't know how are we going? Are we getting everyone? Is Tony or Bo coming back? Like, I don't know.
I think if we saw Patty, we might get Jeff. You know, like I think that because they're around the same time.
It went right? Jeff, Rob, Patty, and I definitely saw Rob.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think you kind of need Jeff because Jeff was the first person who was screwed over. You know, I think for like Tony, it's like, hey, bro. You know, what we gonna do? You know, like there are a few people where it's like, this is unavoidable. For Jeff, I think he's the one he's like the jury foreman. Yeah, like he has to come out and be like, all right, I was the first one who was just out here doing the best I could do. You know, I was giving it my all. I was trying to be a good leader. You know, Dusty loves that. He's like, I'm a good leader. I don't believe in bad leadership. And so I think he's going to look at somebody like Therron and be like, what are you doing? You know, and I think Jeff's going to co-sign that because he was backstabbed by the combination of Becky Lee and Therron, and I think Nick to an extent too, you know, like they all kind of had a coup against him. And so if you give somebody like Therron the opportunity, I don't know. I think you're right. I think he's burned so many people that maybe they do all just lean on Jeannie and say, you know, like the one person we can all trust is probably Jeannie. Let Jeannie make the decision, and Jeannie will probably do what's best for the group.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like. Well, the thing is that though that like a lot of them did look to Jeannie for a vote, and
that's
she turned
true.
them all down.
She did. She backstabbed Amy.
She backstabbed a lot of people in like for Nick essentially, which is not the best look. So maybe it's Dennis. Pumpkin.
Yeah, which would be crazy because again, Pumpkin. I talked to her last episode. I said, Pumpkin, get it together. And this is an episode I do feel like she did to an extent. Now. I guess
she got it together, but for the wrong reasons.
Right. And then even then, like, I don't know. Did she even get it together, which is just like a creature of the moment, right? Like,
well, that's I think the biggest thing against Pumpkin right now would be Becky Lee going to the jury. How much influence does Becky Lee still have? Because I would imagine Becky Lee's still feeling pretty salty. Like if I'm Becky Lee, like I said, if I'm Becky Lee, I want Nick to win. Nick's the one that got me. He tricked Pumpkin. He got Therron to make a suboptimal move. Like I'm you know what? I went at him and he beat me. I'm going for Nick if I'm Becky Lee, but I don't know if she's going to feel the same way. But like, I have to imagine she's going to not be super enthusiastic about Pumpkin. But I think a lot of other people might be. Certainly Jeff. And, you know, Pumpkin didn't really betray a lot of people. She was voting with a lot of the people that got eliminated. So I feel like she's got a lot of support.
Yeah, and then, I mean, again, like you said, how much influence does Becky Lee have at this time? She shows up like, hey, guys, like, boo, boo.
Yeah, like if she shows up like, oh, I'm so pissed that they lied to me and betrayed me, they're going to be like, excuse us, like, Becky Lee?
Yeah. What? What are you talking about? She's like, well, I was loyal to Pumpkin. It's like, yeah, you were when it was convenient to you. You know, you actually betrayed her several times over. It's tough. I don't know. I would love to see how this works out. I think that this makes it so much more exciting, especially knowing that the end game changes from season to season, right? In the article Mike Bloom wrote, he was saying that the showrunners were saying that there was not even any guarantee that they were going to bring back the eliminated contestants. That's not a staple of the show necessarily. So he was saying like they are free to kind of play with the format however they want every season. How do you feel about
basically like how satisfied are we with these final contestants versus the eliminated ones? We like the eliminated ones more. Let's bring it back.
Like we miss Dusty, you know. That's all what it is. I kind of miss Jeff.
Dusty, Amy, Becky Lee, Dennis. We got to get these people back.
Yeah, but how do you feel about that? The idea that the show can just change its format. I mean, we do watch Survivor and Big Brother, and they do that like a lot. But also the idea that the contestants don't know the rules of the game when they go in.
I mean, I still don't even know what they know and don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, we have no clue.
But I mean, what I will say is, this is a fresh format. I don't mind the idea. This is, you know, especially at something like this where it's more of a like journey kind of adventure show than a proper game show. So it's not like, oh well, we're changing up the rules on you. Like, I don't mind the idea that it's like, hey, here's the primary goal: get to the summit. And there's some extra stuff along the way. What I will say is, if you're gonna make a show or a game where you have things all up in the air and you can change things at a whim, why aren't you doing it more? Why are we stuck with like 9 episodes of like the same thing over and over, like these challenges that it's the same content every single time? Like, switch it up some more, like give us something.
Yeah, because in this episode, they have the hardest climb that they've had so far. So they have 2. They have to go straight up, and that one has almost no type of suspense at all. It's like, all right, we got to go up. That's pretty tough. We've never done that before. But once they get up as high as they are on the summit right now, they have something called the King's Leap. And you have to go across it on one rope, kind of shimmy across it all the way across. And we see Nick falter. He falls. It's very high. He's afraid of heights, and he does fall down, but there's no consequence. And
0
it's like,
ramifications.
You've already shown us that you can put some consequences on this. We've seen it before, because Nick goes up automatically as a nominee. Then Becky Lee doesn't have to go in and campaign for Nick to go up. You know what I'm saying? Like, he falls down when they get to the. She's like, Nick's already on the block. Bet. Okay. Now, who do we want up as the second nominee? I don't care if it's Pumpkin, as long as I got Therron that's going to vote with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, then at that point, maybe the game plays out a little differently. So I think you have a good point. They've tried things that have worked, but they just didn't go and tweak the game enough each round to where it's like we were learning from our mistakes, right? We had a big moment with Bo, and then we never went back to the Bo thing until, you know, we got to Dusty. You know, it's like it took too long to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just completely spaced out on those portions of the show at this point. They're just so meaningless, and like it to the point where it's like, oh, Nick falls. I don't care. Like, he's gonna do it again, and he's gonna get over it. Like, it's gonna happen. Like, it's this. We've seen this a million times at this point. Like, oh, somebody's screaming. Oh man, you know, like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do this. I'm not gonna be. You're gonna do it. I know you're gonna do it.
You got it. It's okay. We believe in you. I've seen you do this 19 times, Therron. I don't believe him anymore. Therron's like, no matter how afraid, like, no matter how many times you do it, you never get less afraid of heights. I was like, that's a lie. That's literally a lie.
Certainly a lie from the viewer perspective.
Right, because I don't think Therron on the first episode could have done what he did on this episode. But, you know, you've done it like 9 times now. So it's kind of like, all right, whatever. It's high up. But, I mean, is there a threshold, Therron? You climb a lot. Is there a threshold between, like, I'm scared of this height, but I'm more afraid of this height? Is there at some point, do you just, like, plateau and be like, no, I'm just high up and it doesn't matter?
That's a good question. I mean, I mean, I've only really climbed like in a gym. So like properly. So like being at the very top of the wall, if you're like top roping or lead climbing, is scarier than being like 3/4 up the wall. You know, it probably, but I'm sure at some point it just stops. What I will say is, like, you know, it doesn't ever really get less scary. You just learn how to manage the fear more.
Yeah, yeah, because they do it. I don't think we've seen one person just be too afraid to do it at all. You know, I think that's the appeal of when you say these people have they're afraid of heights. It's like, okay, well, how afraid of heights? Because you know, on some shows, someone says they're afraid of heights. That means they're not going to jump. You know, they're not going to do it. There's nothing you can do. But then we see people like will rise to the occasion. It's like, okay, well, we know that person, they're afraid of heights, but they're brave enough to where they'll give it a shot. All of these people were willing to try. And once they got out there, as long as they physically could do the task, they were going to accomplish the goal. You know, it did look like for a second, maybe Nick didn't have the strength to get across. But I mean, he goes the second time, you know, and Jeannie kills it on her first time. And then, you know, everybody just knocks it out. Which is also
like weird. Like, if this is some of these challenges are the sorts of things where, like, I mean, a thing in climbing is that, like, you know, you only have a limited amount of strength. Right. So like if you're trying to like climb something, you might eventually run out of grip strength, and like subsequent attempts are going to be harder. So if you make it like halfway through and then fail because you ran out of strength, the next time you might not even make it halfway through because you have less strength left. So I don't know how they were dealing with that. I assume that all of the challenges were easy enough that like falling was just a symptom of like poor technique, and then like they can like give them better technique in the future, or they made it easier the next time. I don't know, but either way, like none of this, like at the end of the day, like none of it ever really mattered all that much. So yeah, it just seemed like, I mean, similar to the traders to me, where like the challenges are just, I just literally, if I'm watching the traders, I just skip through the challenges because
no point.
They're pointless. These often felt really pointless.
Yeah, I just want them to benefit them from, they're doing all these tasks, you know, like at least throw them a bone. You know, I think that even if you're not going to penalize them, I did a good thing, you know, show me some love. You know, okay, you did it in this amount of time, you get a gold star, you get a little extra money in the pot, you get, you know, whatever, some food, you know, a loved ones. I don't know. You get something.
You lose your vote. Survivor would do this. You lose your vote if you fall.
Yeah, something. And I think, for this one, when we saw Nick fall, I think that giving him a penalty at that point makes this vote drastically different. Not to say that I'm out here trying to save Becky Lee, but I think her game looks different if Nick is like, all right, you're automatically the nominee now. Now, you know, all Becky Lee has to make sure she's not the other nominee. You know, like, don't get me wrong, she's trying to save Pumpkin, but if she can make it through this round without ending up on the block, that's a good round for her. And I think it just looks different.
It does look different. The thing I just want there to be some kind of tension there, and to have it impact the later portion of the episode makes some sense. But I also like wouldn't want to do something that ruins what we got in this episode, at least, because that was fun. So yeah. Either way, we're heading to the end of season 1 of The Summit. I hope they close it out strong. I hope that the finale is fun. I think we've talked through a lot of different ways where it could be very entertaining. There are probably a lot of ways where it could be very boring, which is like everyone shares the money. Yay.
Yeah, most of these reality competition shows, the finale do be boring though. You know, it's a lot of like, and I don't want to put this on The Summit but we know what's going to happen. The Summit at the beginning of every episode is like a movie. It's like the first 6 minutes are just like this season on The Summit, and day 1, and then like, oh no, and then you see Amy crying, like you see all the stuff, the mouth keeper coming in, the ropes are shaking, it's all crazy, it's pandemonium, and then the show starts, and it's kind of like walking through the snow. You know, and so I can imagine, you know, I think Big Brother Canada does this too, like really well. Like when you get the finale, the first 16 minutes is just like this season, and you see all the biggest things that happen. They have the opportunity to do that again. And I was like, okay, we don't have to do that. We do not have to lean into like all the cool stuff they got us here when you can do some cool stuff here. I thought the challenge looks like they're just going to have to hang from a helicopter. That seems like fun.
Yeah.
Very scary if you're afraid of heights, for sure, to just be hanging from a helicopter. But how do you lose? What do you fall?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll just get you back up. Like, all right,
Like,
hang from the helicopter
this
again.
scene, like, I think these kinds of scenes would be interesting like 20 years ago on a TV show, where it's like, this is the only, like, I can literally just within 5 seconds type in mountain climbing thing in YouTube and see like better examples of like watching this kind of cool stuff with higher stakes probably. Like, so like, yeah, it's just not doing enough when you're not adding it into the game more.
I just started watching The Challenge again recently because they got to their, momentous 40th season or whatever. And so I started watching it. I was started watching a couple seasons ago to try to get caught up a little bit. And they do stuff like this all the time. All the time. Whether it's hanging from a helicopter, jumping off of something high, they scale buildings sometimes. Like they are always pushing the limits here, but the stakes are higher. It's always like, if you win this, you could go, you can pick who's going up for elimination, but if you lose, you will go immediately into elimination. They could just insert a little bit more of that. And I think we're cooking with grease here. But right now, this is a good first draft of what I think could be a really, really good show. If they just keep tweaking it, they keep playing with the format a little bit.
It's got good bones. It's got good pieces that they just need to be put together in different ways, I think. But anything else, Chappell?
Just shout out to casting. I know, like, I've been making fun of them for lying to these people to get them on the show, but I think they really did pick some gamers, despite us not knowing the game that these people were playing. People like Becky Lee, Nick, even some of our fallen soldiers along the way, Dennis, ones that really came out to be like, yeah, we're climbing a mountain, but let's make it fun. Let's vote people out. Let's, so form some alliances. It could have easily been just Becky Lee versus a bunch of pawns. And there were times where it felt like that, but there were definitely other times where you could see the more self-interested players kind of showing themselves for who they were. So whatever they did, whatever Survivor casting rejects they picked off of this, or process they used to cast this season, keep doing that. Keep doing that. Bring us more people who are willing to go out and cut some throats to get to the top of the mountain. If I wanted to watch a rock climbing competition, I could just go to YouTube. Make it spicy, make it fun.
Yes. All right. Well, that is what we have for you then this week. One last episode of the summit remaining. Stay tuned for some more summit content if you're interested. And check out all the other stuff we got going on. Survivor stuff, Big Brother stuff, scripted shows. The Tastemakers is a podcast where we talk about what you should and shouldn't watch. Where, if the summit was a scripted show, we talk about it on the Tastemakers, and I'd be like, do you need to watch it? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe for the coverage.
Right. Yeah. Watch the podcast. Do that,
What are you up to, Chappell?
Same thing as you, just podcasting and talking about these shows. I'm doing little scripted things over on the We Know Scripted RHAP feed, talking about sex lives of college girls with Sasha. I think
that's a show, by the way.
Yes, and we talk about Sasha's sex life when she was a college girl as well. she has to give her own insight. We have to put a little bit of ourselves into this coverage. I obviously don't, because none of my business. But I'm there to ask Sasha all the hard hitting questions over on the We Know Scripted feed, and then you can catch me on Recap Kickback. It's my podcast where I'm talking about whatever I want to talk about. And last week we talked about Cross, the show on Amazon Prime, starring Alice Hodge, about the Alice Cross series. That was a good time. And then this week we got other things to talk about too. So check that out. Recapkickback.com, youtube.com/@recapkickback, and then Recap Kickback on all social media platforms, including Blue Sky.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today, and we will see all of you next time.